Like we're not yeah, it's rather an informal thing. Like as you can tell, I'm an informal dude. It doesn't have to be CNN, BBC, worldwide news or anything like that. You just talk, and that's fine. Um,
Cool.
the scoliosis expert, right? This is fascinating to me. I've had a couple of different spinal injuries in the past, and coached a lot of people kind of through them. That coaching in gyms, you see a lot of random stuff, and they come in like, "Oh, wow, this is new. Okay, let's try and somehow figure this one out." Obviously, in liaisoning with the professionals like yourself. But you've got a pretty rad story, and also I really want to dive into like scoliosis as a individual thing because I know there's a lot of people out there that suffer from it, right? And are just like, oh, okay, I can't do anything. This is just kind of the hand I'm dealt, and you're like, well, no, we can still move, I guess. Let's try. Um, so take it away. Here's the mic. Talk to me.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with a little background about me and kind of how I became who I am today. So, I was diagnosed with scoliosis as a teenager, which most people are. Most cases of scoliosis are what we call adolescent idiopathic, meaning that they are found in those teenage years. And we still really don't have 100% knowledge of how it develops. We're learning more about it, but that's when most people are diagnosed. So I was diagnosed as a teenager, brought to the doctor, basically said, look, you have this 30-degree curve. There's
Wow.
really not much you can do at this point. You're finished growing, just go on with your life, try to stay active, and all the general information you get usually with when you go for that type of appointment. And at the time, there was no specific therapies or anything for scoliosis. It was just kind of like, there's nothing we can do about this. So good luck. And I remember walking into the library to get a second set of textbooks because they told me, don't ever put any weight on your back. Don't lift anything. Be very careful. And so I'm carrying, like my soccer bag that's, whatever, 30 pounds with all my equipment in it and my backpack. And the librarian looks at me, she's like, but you're carrying this soccer bag, you're playing sports. Like, why do you need extra textbooks? Like that doesn't make any sense. You seem perfectly fine. And so that was the first time I actually had this realization like, maybe this is not such a big deal. Like maybe I can do these things that I was told like you're not supposed to do. And so I competed in track and field, and my track and field coach said, hey, I think that if you started lifting weights, it would tremendously help your track performance. So he brought me down to basically this basement dingy gym where people were competing in Olympic weightlifting. And I was like one of
Yes.
three girls there. And it was the time before CrossFit, before anything made weightlifting popular. Weightlifting was like this tiny little niche sport that nobody knew about unless you watched it in the Olympics. And I just glued to it like a magnet. I was like, I love this. I was like, really enjoyed it, but always had this thought of like, I'm watching other people lift and I'm seeing me lift. And I'm like, why, when Jess lifts, like she doesn't look rotated or like the barbell isn't off balance or like, but never related that back to having my scoliosis, always thinking like, am I doing something wrong? Is there something wrong with my form? Whatever. And honestly, it wasn't really until I became a physical therapist that I learned about having scoliosis and what that meant. I was introduced to the Schroth method, which is a specific exercise technique for scoliosis that we use as physical therapists. And I'm sitting in the lecture about the Schroth method, just happening because the woman who was teaching it was an alumni of my PT school. It wasn't even popular at the time. And I'm sitting there going, oh, that's why when I did overhead lift, like it was always crooked. That's why when I squatted, my pelvis always wanted to shift towards one side. I can never get it to stay center because it all related back to my curve. And I never understood that. So when I put that together and I trained in Schroth, I realized that there was no world for people with scoliosis to exercise. It was kind of like you get thrown into a group class or you get told not to exercise, which is
Mhm.
probably a lot of like what we both see people being told is like, oh, don't lift anything over a certain weight, don't put weights over your head and things like that. So that's really when I started working with people to get them to start strength training, because I realized that there was so much benefit from understanding your curve and then being able to train. Like when I understood my curve, it kind of brought my lifting to the next level. So I wanted to kind of give people that opportunity as well. So that's basically how it became to where I am now, where, we work with people with scoliosis and spinal fusions, other spine conditions, to start strength training in a way that feels safe, exciting, comfortable for them.
Wow. Like you hear it all the time, right? When someone's kind of diagnosed with some sort of abnormality to the spine, they're like, "Ah, yeah, don't lift," and that to me kind of like part of my soul dies. I'm just like, wait, what do you mean don't lift? Does that mean like don't lift anything? Like not even a remote, not even a bag, you're shopping, because it's all just real world application, right? Like there's 0.001% of people that train is ever gonna be a professional, right? And then even less is gonna make it to the pinnacle of that sport. And don't get me wrong, we both did sports at one time. We both wanted to be professionals at this given sport. Everybody does, right? All the kids have dreams, and I think that's incredible. But everybody else, all the other people that don't make it, you and I included, all right, we made it in some other format of the physical realm, right? Um, it's like what? So they shouldn't do any of this? I was like, guys, we're kind of bound to this organic being, and if we don't kind of use it, we're gonna, you know, lose it. So why don't we try and figure this one out? It always rings alarm bells in my head when it's like, oh, I was just told not to do things. You're like, oh, short term, maybe. Yes. Like maybe that's a good idea short term. Don't keep beating that drum. It's the leather's gonna get a little bit taut and break. But maybe look a little bit longer term.
Right. And you bring up a good point to say, like, okay, if you have someone tell you never lift more than 5 pounds, that's putting like a big restriction on you, because probably your laundry weighs more than 5 pounds, your groceries weigh more than 5 pounds, your kids, your grandkids weigh more than 5 pounds. It's like, so what do you do in that case? Do you just not train? And I think that's where a lot of people run into issues, is like they don't train in the sense of exercise, but then life like has challenges in it that they're not prepared for. And then that's where we like predispose ourselves a little bit more to having injuries, because we're doing things that are outside of what we're prepared for.
Mm,
So to me, I think I've had this like conversation before. I think it's almost unethical to tell someone not to strength train. Of course, in like a very specific case of like they have an acute injury, right? We might need to modify, et cetera. But I feel like you're setting them up for more issues and more challenges in the future if you're not giving them that opportunity to prepare for what life at least is bringing at them. Like you said, we don't have to be a world champion weightlifter, but we need to have some foundation to be able to be successful at our day to day life, right?
100%.
Um,
I could not agree more. Like, I like that unethical point. I wouldn't have tied those two together, but as you've said it, like, yes, 100%, I think so. And it's CrossFit did me a world of good, hence why I'll still coach it and still do it. Weightlifting again does me a world of good, still coach it, still do it. Of the sense of, oh, you move in this plane of motion or you have this implement, you can't do this. Like your body can't actually move in that position because of past injuries, because of past sports, because of laziness or whatever, right? And I'm like, oh, I've got massive holes in my game. And that game is the ability to move. That's not like, oh, okay, I'm going to go the CrossFit Games, and if something comes up, I'm not going to be able to get 100 points and win the event. It's like, no, 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 no. Like your ability to move is hindered because of all these different things. We can get into that, but you need to kind of address this thing. And that's what, came into my mind. I'm like, oh, I can't move. Like my T spine does not extend. I got nothing, and I'm like, oh, okay. How do I then have to kind of compensate in a way that isn't going to negatively affect me, right? And then I can learn that and then pass it on for coaching as people come in. But a scoliosis is a different kettle of fish, right? I find it fascinating.
I think the big thing people don't understand about scoliosis is that it's three-dimensional, right? So people think of scoliosis as like an S, right? You just see that one dimension of like the spine is curved to the right and then it's curved to the left. And most people, and there's a lot of variety in that, absolutely. But really, the curve is three-dimensional. So it also has rotation. It also has a change in kind of the side profile of the person, like what you're talking about in terms of like the thoracic spine. Actually, people with scoliosis tend to be a little bit flatter on their thoracic spine. So when we look at that, we realize that that's a spine that just needs even more support and stability than the average person. So actually, the techniques we use for scoliosis are focused a lot on stability and strengthening all those supporting muscles of the spine. So, what a better way to do that than to strength train, right? And I think there is an element of people will say, well, I have scoliosis. I'm always crooked. I've never be able to lift completely straight. I won't be able to line up, let's say the same. And in a way, to me, as long as I'm not seeing a huge breakdown in form or a huge like sinking into their curve, I'm okay with that because they're actually strengthening those supporting muscles. And we're keeping, the big thing that we want to avoid is the progression. So if we're able to strengthen and we're able to hold a better position, we're keeping away that progression, right? So to me, it's like if we can teach people what's the best way to hold your body position, can you stack your body up in a way where you're as much as you can reducing those curves? And then can we strengthen you in that position? Because then that's the next level, right? Is being able to understand your body, how it moves, and then go from there and really build yourself as a stronger human in general. And I think for me, what's interesting is I wish I had my x-rays from when I was a teen because my curve is very balanced. And I think a reason why it balanced itself is because I lifted weights. And like if you're not lining up properly, the weights are going to fall off the barbell, right? So
Yeah.
so I think that there's an element of that just through my career without even realizing I developed some of these techniques that we're using with our clients because it was like a way to keep my curve and a better alignment and a way to progress more in my lifting. So yeah, I think there are some differences, but I still think it's definitely accessible for people with scoliosis to strength train.
Like I absolutely love you for saying like how can we strengthen it and support it, because that's a big school of thought that I subscribe to of just like, oh, okay, cool. We've got this malleable thing and this organic thing that's a body. And how do we strengthen it? How do we be harder to kill at the end of the day? How do we make bulletproof shoulders, backs, knees, ankles, whatever it is, right? And then that ultimately translates over to less pain in everyday life. How can we then help people live a better life and be able to move? We've all done it. We've all got up out of bed and it's taken us 3 hours to warm up so our knees stop clicking like a bloody, whatever it is, snap, crackle, and pop, and then back's not opening up. And it's not good, man. We probably did it for sport, and we're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna put my spine on the line for an extra couple kilos. And you're like, probably not the wisest of decisions, but it's like how do we help people with abnormalities? Everybody's different and every body is different, and I think it's fascinating watching people move, and you're like, oh, okay, that might be a little bit of a deviation. We might have to work around that and work with it, right? How do we strengthen it? Cool. But it's also like, how do I then adapt coaching and the movement pattern to suit you as that body, rather than just like you have to move like me? I was like, no, dude, like that's not gonna work. It's like my overhead position is a great example of like, no, 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 I'm gonna have a wider jerk. I was like, why? I was like, because my it doesn't matter how much mobility I do, my shoulders will not be as open as yours. I spent like best part of 10 years smacking people with my shoulders for a living and playing rugby, right? I'm just like, no, it's not gonna happen, man. Like my ACJ is just as tight as a duck's asshole. It's not gonna move. My upper back does not want to shift. And then you see people with a super wide sumo stance squat, and you're like, what is that? Like, that's incredible. I'm not gonna bring your feet in because you move like that, you're pain free. Sounds good, but I'm not replicating that at all. I'm not doing no sumo squats. My hips will scream at me and like an 80-year-old woman. But my question would be, if someone is living with scoliosis and has a rotation as well, how do you go about that? Like that is like a clusterfuck. Okay, what do we do? Where do we start?
Yeah, it's a good question because this is something that we work a lot on in the Schroth method is using positioning, using breathing techniques to kind of work on teaching the body to derotate because we know that the spine is some of the curve is built into the spine and the bones. We think that how the scoliosis develops is an error in the bony growth, right? So one side of the vertebrae grows faster than the other, and we think that's what initiates the curve. But we know that some of that is flexible. Some of that is actually related to how the brain envisions the body and positions the body in response to the scoliosis. So we know there are those proprioceptive, meaning like understanding where their curve is in space elements that we can work on, and also the muscular elements, right? Like we can teach the muscles to hold the curve in a better position. I think one of the big things I work on with especially my people who are lifters with scoliosis is how to brace their curve, right? So knowing that they have a curve in their thoracic spine, we work on a lot of bracing where we teach them to use the muscles on the concavity of their curve, actually try to get those stronger so that they can brace and hold that stable position. Because a lot of what I notice is people will tend to sink down into that collapse, that concave side. So that's one way that we use a lot is a bracing aspect. And the other thing that works really well for the rotation is using elongation. So if you think of the spine as almost like the spine with scoliosis, it's almost like a spiral in a sense. So when we use elongation, you can almost think about as if you had wrung out a towel to the point where it rotated and then you pulled it from either end, you kind of create that level. You can get it to derotate and actually bend a little bit less when you pull from either end. So that's what we kind of use as the analogy for elongation. So we actually use a lot of hanging type exercises like hanging from a pull-up bar or stretching up a wall and kind of feeling that length. So then they can use that also even after they strength train to kind of reestablish that lengthened alignment for them, because we tend to kind of shrink over the course of the day. Everybody does a little bit, but with scoliosis, we tend to like to do that more because we can be lazy with it. So we also work on that elongation work to undo that. So those are the big ones that I think for anyone, even a trainer who doesn't have experience maybe with this scoliosis specific methods, those are very easy ways that you can integrate to really optimize your client, their
Mm.
performance.
Yeah, I think I would even go further, right? And I think everybody needs to spend a little bit more time hanging. Whether it's shoulder health, whether it's just
True.
decompression of the spine, whether it's, grip strength, even if you wanted to throw that one in there. Like the more time I spend hanging, the better my shoulder feels, the better my back feels. I am a massive fan of belt squats, like an unbelievable fan of belt squats. If I had some cash to throw away, I'd buy one for my house, although they are massive
They are
machines.
massive.
Like you would need an entire house just to kind of fill that with one machine. But I love it. Like anything that can decompress my spine. Like I mentioned, like a couple of injuries in the past, one in the C spine, one down in the lumbar as well. So kind of top and bottom. Um, but I'm a massive fan. Everything that we do is kind of flexion extension, no rotation, no lateral stuff either, and definitely no decompression. So I'm like, we need to hang a lot more.
Absolutely.
If a coach comes to you kind of fresh off the bat or not, but has zero knowledge, experience with scoliosis, right? And they came to you and was like, listen, Beth, like I got this member comes in, they got scoliosis. Um, how would you inform them to go about it? How would you advise? What would you say? What would you say to look at? Anything.
Absolutely. I think the first thing from just a psychological standpoint is to listen to the person and empower them, because realize this person's probably coming in with a lot of like pre being told, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, like you shouldn't do this, you're going to hurt yourself, your curve is progressing, all this. So having attention to knowing that this person may be a little bit more scared, a little bit more nervous to try new things because they may not have an understanding of what's going on with their curve. And they may have been given a lot of mixed information about what they can and can't do. So, in terms of more the physical evaluation side, I always like to try to get a general idea of like where their curve is. So a good way you can test this is if you have them bend forward, you can see the rotation. So basically you'll see their one side of their spine to be a little bit higher than the other, and that will indicate the higher side will indicate where they have a curve. So many people will have a curve on their right thoracic and their left lumbar spine, but sometimes they might just have one or the other. Sometimes they might have it flipped. So just doing a check to have an idea of that, because if they're telling you like, hey, I'm having a lot more pain on my right upper back, you can kind of have the like, oh, okay, that's where their curve is. So I have to work on stabilizing there a little more. And then I always emphasize working and starting in a neutral spine position and allowing them to kind of find what neutral is for them, because you may notice that their ribs are hanging out way over to one side and their pelvis is hanging out way over to the other side. So teaching them how to align that, right? And it's as easy as like, okay, let's get you to get your ribs lined up over your hips, try to stand as tall as you can, that elongation cue, and then let's just do some bicep curl or something, maybe a starting point just to start getting muscles activating around that. So you're teaching your body how to use now this new position. And I would always emphasize the stability side of things. I think there's this misconception that with scoliosis, you have to stretch it. Like one side is concave because the muscles are super tight. And it's not necessarily that they're physiologically tight. It's that they're in a different length tension relationship because of the curve. So sometimes actually those muscles are actually not tight, but they're weak. And we need to work on strengthening them.
Mhm.
So I tell people, using hanging, we already discussed that we love that, but I don't have them go crazy too much into like stretching towards one side or bending towards the other side, because really what's going to give this person the most benefit is that strengthening and that stability work. And actually, like you said, that can help them reduce their pain, that can help them stand in a better posture, that can help them feel more confident and do more in their day to day. Right. So I think if we're talking about just like foundational things, that's where I generally start with many of my clients, is just having them find an understanding of how to position their body when they're exercising, and then starting to gradually progress into some of what they'll start out with, and realizing that it doesn't have to be an exact fit. Like we said, if they're not comfortable putting a barbell on their back, you can do a belt squat, you can do a goblet squat, there's so many options of things you can modify, and really give people an opportunity to access exercise at whatever level that they come in at.
Mm, mm. Yeah, 100%. I do think assessing or not assessing, addressing the psychological factor first, because humans are clever. Like they'll end up figuring it out. Like, yeah, okay, they need a different set of eyes and be like, hey, Beth, I just want you to kind of push a little bit more to the left, because when we get fatigued, especially, we're gonna start kind of overcompensating, right? Like we all do it, whether we're professional athletes or not. It doesn't matter. We all will do it. So addressing that first, have just been like, first of all, we can do things. All right, well done for coming in. High five, and let's start cracking on. This is an open communication channel, so we're gonna bat off each other, right? I'm not just here to be the dictator, and you're just gonna follow my lead. It's like, no, no, no. I'm gonna follow your lead as well. Right? I'm gonna pass you that conch of Lord of the Flies, right? And you have a turn of talk, and I have to then adapt on the fly, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And yeah, like stability, like just okay, how do we move, how do we do something, right? And that adaptation, like I really really rate that. I really relate to it. And yeah, like it's no different to anything else, whether it's an acute injury or whether it's a complete chronic thing. Is like, okay guys, like this body is moving slightly differently. How do we then help this person move a little better, so then their life gets a little better on top of that?
Right. Right. Exactly. And just understanding that difference of like that adaptable versus that optimal, right? Like realizing, okay, this person may never have an optimal looking squat or an optimal looking. We may always see a little bit rotation. We may always see a little bit shift. But are they able to adapt that as the weight goes up? Can they keep that same position? Can they be aware of how to hold their body? Can they feel comfortable with that progression? So I think that's a big feature of what we look at with our clients as well. Is yes, we may always see a little bit the pelvis shifting towards one side, but as long as it's staying, as long as it's staying the same, they're able to maintain that level. That's one of an important thing for us.
Mm. I mean, as weightlifters, we hear the saying all the time, right? Make every rep look the same. But that's
Right.
between us and us. It's you and you, it's me and me, it's someone else and someone else, right? It's not for me towards you and you towards me. I'm not going to move the bar the same as you. You're not going to move the bar the same as me, And it's kind of comparing to yourself. And I love that approach of just like, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? If it's
Exactly.
getting worse, yeah, we're doing something wrong, guys. We're gonna have to go back to that drawing board and stop doing that. But it's the same as the deadlift, right? Like we're like, oh, we want to straight back, neutral spine, or whatever we throw out at these athletes. Like, dude, they don't know what you're talking about. First of all, give them a better cue than just neutral spine, because people don't know what that is, right? And second of all, like, is their spine flexing or extending through that movement under load? And I was like, if yes, so yeah, cardinal sin, backhand them with a wet salmon. We need to go back in and figure this one out. We can't be doing that. But is it moving? No. Okay, cool. So does it necessarily matter if it starts in a little bit more of a flex position? I was like, well, maybe not, And I find it fascinating of just new studies coming out, new people just kind of, hey, why don't we just think about this one, guys? Because you guys are the smart ones and we're the practical application on the dance floor, and be able to communicate between the two of us. We're like, great, we get to help people. I think it's a really special job.
Absolutely. And it can make a big deal for someone. Like, I don't think a lot of times we realize like we're thinking of it from the physical sense and like I'm got this person is stronger, they're making PRs, they're moving up, but like how much that can change their life. And how many people come back to us like after they've been clients, like a year later and they're like, wow, I can't imagine what my life would have been if I stayed where I was. before I joined the program. Now I feel like I'm able to lift. I'm able to feel confident in my program. I'm able to, go to that next level, not have to worry about my spine limiting me, and just also having that ability to now have something that's going to keep them healthy for the rest of their life. It's so important to that next level.
Yeah, I think that's the major point. Like I relate really hard to physical therapists, right? Because that's the business that you're in, and a lot of the time, people that may surround coaches, they're like, no, 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 I got to get this person performance ready, PRs, hitting this competition. I was like, at the end of the day, man, like if you break this individual, none of that matters. I remember being the kind of lead S&C coach for a swimming club, and they were pretty competitive, right? They had people going to the Youth Olympics and some phenomenal swimmers, but I would butt heads with one of their coaches every single day because they're like, no, no, we got to rag them. We got to get this. Da, da, da. I'm like, dude, like if they walk down the stairs or they play, netball in PE at school, and because they're not bulletproof, they hurt themselves and they can't get in the pool, right? And they're out for the season. Like you've now lost not only an athlete, all right, for you to look good on paper, but you've probably lost a person. And they're then going to go through a lot of psychological stuff, and we'll leave that to the psychologist, right? And that's we've missed the boat. We failed that human being. Like with the people first, the athletes second. You know.
Absolutely. And that can change like the course of their whole, I've spoken with people that are like, yeah, I used to be active. I used to be this. And then I went to this trainer and they pushed me so hard. I got like scared to do it. I got injured and then I got scared to do anything after that. Right. So you can set them up for an entire course, change there if you're not kind of meeting them where they're at and progressing them in a way that's comfortable for them.
Yeah, especially like the transition from it's their identity, their transition from athlete to non-athlete. Like if that isn't nurtured and that's just spontaneous, like that's not good, man. Like the amount of times you see people fall off and they get onto drink, drugs, whatever they start doing, they just fall down the wrong rabbit hole, right? And you're just like, that's because we've not looked after these people. That is our job, like to look after these people in the way that we deem fit, and also collaboratively. Like we're the fitness industry. We're not just, hey, I'm a coach, go fuck yourself, everybody else. It's like, no, no, no. Like I'm gonna know some things, you're gonna know some things, they're gonna know some things. Like, why don't we just be adults and talk about it and be like, how do we help this person the most, the best? I was like, that's but hey, it is we don't live in an ideal world.
Right. Right.
I got 3 questions.
Okay.
What's the greatest piece of life advice you've ever received?
The greatest piece of life advice I ever received. That's a good question. I think, man, just not caring what people think. I mean, I think that's a big one in the scoliosis world because we can also be so self-conscious about how we look, and just getting to that point where it's like, I don't care. Like I'm sure you can tell that I have scoliosis, but also I can deadlift double my body weight. So I don't care what you think about it. Honestly, I think that one was really big for me, and really helped me kind of come into my own as a person.
Mm. What's the worst piece of life advice you ever received?
Um, Probably those who, like, when I worked in kind of the traditional healthcare setting, just told me, like, don't rock the boat. Like, you don't want
Mm.
to, like, you have a really good position here. You don't want to go into something unknown. Like, just stay with what you're doing. Just don't change. Like, go for the easy route where you can. I think that just like stifles our growth so much. I would say that's probably the worst I ever got.
I like that a lot.
Mhm.
Like that really resonates with me, and I like that a lot. Yeah. Like it being the worst, not the best. Like just to
Right, right.
clarify. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's great. Um, 3 words you tell your younger self.
3 words.
Yeah.
Probably never give up. I just, going through trying to compete at a high level, knowing that I had this curve, knowing that like it was going to be tougher for me to build through it, and just having that like you can still do this, and then it doesn't have to be at the level that it once was. Like you don't have to be a national champion every time. Like you can still be a great lifter and enjoy it. um and you shouldn't just like give it up or leave it.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Beth, thank you so much. This has been so insightful, and I appreciate what you do, your time, and yourself so much. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been really great to chat, and I appreciate you inviting me on.
No, thank you. And if I ever get over to New York, I'll let you know.
Visit us. Let's train together sometime.
All right, we'll throw a barbell.
There you go.
Sounds good. Have a
All
good day.
right.
Bye,
You
everybody.
too. Bye.